Welcome to Mediocre Gaming, and today we're playing The Division 2. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and salutations. Today, nerfs, buffs, and delays. Let's get to it. Alright, so they gave out a whole bunch of information in the state of the game, so let's just dive right into it because there is a lot of ground to cover. First and foremost, the raid has been delayed from April 26th, and they have a PTS set up already, so if you're on the PC, you can sign up for it and start looking at the changes. But you're looking at about a 4-week delay, and that may change depending on what they find out during the PTS. Alright, now gear score, you can creep up to 515. And that will be DZ only. So World Tier 5, you can get up to gear score 500. You can creep up a little bit by recalibrating, but you will be able to get up to 515 drops in the Dark Zone only. So go into the Dark Zone and get those drops. Now this is all with the next update, which includes the raid. So you'll have to wait for that update in order for these changes to come into effect. DZ is going to have more contaminated gear, so you're going to have less of the uncontaminated gear that you can just pick up. More contaminated gear. Contaminated gear, of course, is more powerful gear, so there's going to be more of that. And to that end, you're going to start off with 5 spaces in your contaminated bag, and then with all your perks you're going to be able to hold 10. So that makes a lot more sense with all the contaminated gear that will be dropping. Going along with that, the Dark Zone has felt a little bit empty to some people. And one of the reasons for that is the number of brackets for the Dark Zone. Now, when you go into the Dark Zone, you don't see a bracket, but previously there were brackets for 1 to 30 level. And then World Tier 1 had its own, World Tier 2, and so forth and so on. So there were a lot of different brackets that were involved. So when you went into the Dark Zone, you might not have that big of a pool to deal with. So now they're going to reduce that down to 2 brackets. Levels 1 through 30 is going to be all in one Dark Zone. And then all World Tier, so World Tier 1 all the way through to World Tier 5 is going to be in another Dark Zone. And this is regular Dark Zone. Occupied Dark Zone, of course, doesn't even start until World Tier 1. And since it does have to do with power matters, you're probably not going to go into the Occupied Dark Zone until World Tier 4 or World Tier 5. Everything's going to be normalized to gear score 500, whereas previously it was not. You're going to maintain your skill mods and the rolls on your weapons, which currently you are not able to. It's based off of normalization and their algorithm. So if you had a weapon with really good rolls, you will be able to maintain those rolls. Same thing with skill mods. If you have them unlocked before normalization, you're going to keep those open after. They're changing the global PvP modifier from 70% to 40%. What does that mean even? So the amount of damage that you do to a AI enemy is going to be at 100%. Whatever your damage on your weapon says, that's what damage you're going to be doing. Of course, plus or minus any weapon modifiers and armor modifiers that the AI has. Now, currently, it is 70% of that number. So if you do 10,000 damage per bullet, it, of course, is going to be 7,000 damage per bullet. And the next update, it's going to go down to 4,000 damage per bullet. So the time to kill is going to go up. It's going to take longer to take other people out, and that means there's going to be more time to react, and skills will play a bigger role in these encounters, whether it's in Conflict or DZ or Occupied Dark Zone or ODZ. So in other words, when you get ganked, you will actually have a course of action other than just plopping on the floor like a wet noodle. They've mentioned that PvP can be tuned separately from PvE, so all your skills and weapons, armor, all that stuff can be tuned separately. So when you look at your stats and your normalized stats, it's going to be reflected in some of that. They're changing hipfire in PvP content. So when you're fighting other agents in the Dark Zone or you're playing Conflict, if you're hip firing, you will lose your crit. So you have 0 crit chance, 0 crit damage if you're hip firing. If you're aiming down the sights, you'll still have it. They want to make hip fire a last resort. Now in Division 1, there would be people running around in the dark zone and would never aim down sights and just run around and unload magazine after magazine and run right up to other agents. They don't want a repeat of that, so they're going to nip that in the bud and get rid of crit on the hip fire, which will help because that crit chance and crit damage can add a whole bunch of extra damage that you wouldn't necessarily have had. Getting rid of that is going to put people that only hip fire at a severe disadvantage in a firefight. In the DZ, there is going to be no rogue cooldown. If you went rogue and you got taken out, there would be a timer, 30 seconds or a minute, whatever, currently, where you could not go rogue again. They're going to get rid of that entirely. So there's still going to be a toggle cooldown. So if you're doing a fake out on going rogue, that will still be there. But if you die while you're rogue, you can go rogue immediately after. If you go back to your team, you'll sync back up with them and be rogue right away. As a result of that, the DZ perk tier 4 will reduce XP loss going while you're rogue instead of reducing the cooldown. The Occupied Dark Zone ODZ will have, not in the next update, but in a future update, Red Rogue and Manhunt. So no Gray Rogue, but you will be able to have Disavowed and Manhunt Rogue status, which again harkens back to the early days of the Dark Zone in Division 1. And they are going to be reducing XP loss in ODZ, which is good because I think it was overly severe in its current form. You could easily lose 3, 5, 8, 10 levels in the ODZ in firefights with other agents if you lose fights over and over again if you can't get away from them. They're going to reduce the AI patrols by some amount. They haven't said exactly what it is. The reason for that is to reduce the AI's influence on a PvP battle in the Dark Zone. Now, you're still going to have, of course, AI at the landmarks, and they are going to play a role if you go in to gank agents there or if you get ganked. But if you only want the PvP aspect, you can do it in the street away from the landmarks. The Thieves' Den is going to have multiple improvements to it over the course of the life of the game, but in the next update, you're going to be able to weapon swap because one of the advantages of going into the Thieves' Den is getting that special ammo. Currently, you'd be locked into getting that special ammo on your primary weapon or whatever weapon that you went into the Thieves' Den with, and now you'll be able to swap out so you can get that special ammo on the gun that you actually want it on. There's going to be a variety of conflict changes where you spawn with teammates, and the boosts that you find in conflict will actually help a little bit less than they currently do, as well as skill cooldowns will continue after death. Currently, when you die, your skill cooldowns automatically reset, so you'll be able to use your skills again. Now, if this carries over to PvE, they've not said, although I would not be surprised. Exotics. Exotics are getting damage buffs across the board. Pestilence in particular is getting a boost in addition for PvP. So not only is it getting a damage boost along with the other exotics, but it is also getting a PvP boost, making it more viable in both conflict and in the Dark Zone. And they said that exotics are not only supposed to just do more damage, faster, whatever, it is also supposed to be fun, or maybe it's only supposed to be a fun weapon that you can play around with, not necessarily doing more damage than its archetype. And there are a whole slew of changes to talents, both on armor and on weapons, but I'll let them rattle those all off so you get an idea of what is coming. The big news, of course, with that is that the build that you currently have is probably not going to be the build that you have in the next title update in May, and that will, of course, change how you have your armor and your weapons set up. Some of these are buffs, some of these are nerfs, some of them are buffs and nerfs at the same time because of the changes to the negative aspect of it, or the positive aspect isn't as much as you would think. So a lot going on with the next update whenever it happens to come out. But that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to ring the bell before you leave to be notified of all future episodes as soon as they go live. And thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll see you next time.
All right, talent name and then changes. Unhinged, damage bonus reduced to 20% from 25%. Handling, negative reduced to 25% from 35%. All right. Strained, the talent, missing armor requirement increased from 10 to 15%. Increased to 10% from 5%. I've already messed it up. Frenzy, in PvE, reloading from empty grants 20% weapon damage instead of 35%, and 15% rate of fire for 3 seconds instead of 35% for 7 seconds. All right. In PvP, reloading from empty grants 15% weapon damage instead of 25%, and 15% rate of fire for 3 seconds instead of 25% for 7 seconds. And I guess that is the PvP and PvE specific changes that Ryan was just talking about. Preservation. In PvE, killing an enemy repairs 10% armor over 5 seconds instead of 5% for 3 seconds. Headshots improve the repair to 20% instead of 10%. In PvP, killing an enemy repairs 5% armor over 3 seconds. Headshots improve the repair to 15%, and it requires 7 defense attributes. The Spike talent, headshot kills grant 35% skill damage for 20 seconds instead of 25% for 10, so that's a huge buff. Requires 5 utility attributes instead of 3. Reformation. Headshot kills increase skill repair and healing by 50% for 20 seconds instead of 25% for 25 seconds, and requires 9 utility attributes. All right, on gear. Critical, reduced critical hit damage bonus from 8% to 5%. Surgical, reduced critical hit chance bonus from 8% to 5%. The Safeguard talent, reduced healing bonus from 75% to 50%, reduced duration from 7 to 5 seconds. Set requirement changed from less than 5 to less than 4 offensive attributes. The Clutch talent, increased health gained per critical hit from 15% to 20%. Reduced armor gained per critical hit from 2% to 1%. The Spotter talent, increased weapon damage to pulsed enemies from 10% to plus 20%. Requirement changed from 3 to 5 utility attributes. The Kneecap talent, shooting an enemy in the legs had a 10% chance to apply bleed. Now it's changed to 15%. The Entrench talent, headshots from cover repair increased from 5 to 10% of your armor. The Patience talent, after being in cover for 5 seconds, armor repairs by 5% every 1 second instead of every 3 seconds, and the requirement has been increased from 5 to 9 defense attributes. The Unbreakable talent, again, this is split between PvE and PvP. In PvE, 70% of max armor is repaired when your armor is depleted. Armor kits used within the next 7 seconds are not consumed, instead of 25% and 5 seconds. All right, for PvP, it's 25% of max armor is repaired when your armor is depleted, and armor kits used within the next 7 seconds are not consumed, instead of 15% and 5 seconds. Now requires 11. That's 11 defense attributes. No other talents affecting armor kits as well. The Bloodsucker, again, split between PvE and PvP. Depleting an enemy's armor adds a stack of 25% bonus armor for 10 seconds instead of 20% for 20 seconds. The max stack increased from 5 to 6. In PvP, depleting an enemy's armor adds a stack of 20% bonus armor for 5 seconds with a max stack of 5. Which requires 11 defense attributes instead of 5 offense. So that's a big change, actually. Berserk in PvE, and this is only PvE from what I can see, the 10% weapon damage for every 20% of max armor depleted instead of 10% of max armor depleted. All right. Requires 11 offense attributes and AR, SMG, or LMG equipped. Bloodlust is split between PvE and PvP. In PvE, swapping weapons within 3 seconds of a kill grants 35% weapon damage for 5 seconds instead of 25% for 10 seconds. In PvP, swapping weapons within 3 seconds of a kill grants 20% weapon damage for 5 seconds. Used to require less than 3 defense attributes, but now requires 9 offense attributes instead. And the Blacksmith talent, killing an enemy with your sidearm repairs 50% of your armor, raised from 25%, and it can occur once every 15 seconds, increased from 10. It requires 11 defense attributes instead of 3. Whew!